Hello, I'm David Kain, president of Kain Automotive, and joining me today is one of my dearest friends in the automotive industry and someone that I really love hanging out with, not only in person, but in the digital format. His name is Joe St. John, and Joe is really the evangelist of a company called AutoFi. And over the course of the last several years, we've become really good at collaborating and sharing ideas. We've done a lot of traveling with respect to getting out and talking to dealers. He works with several of the clients that I work with. So it's fun to be able to compare notes. And so, Joe, thank you very much for joining me today. And if you would, share a little bit of your background, because I think it lends to your street credibility.
Thanks, David. I'm super excited to be here, man. I love getting to spend time with you, so I appreciate you having me on. My background's inherently retail. My mom was a service writer at a Chevy store. She met my dad, who was a finance manager. They fell in love, got married, and then raised me in a dealership. I started selling cars in 1998, and I worked through every channel in variable ops till I was a general manager of a Toyota store. Most of my time was selling at the desk and F&I. I ran an internet and BDC department for a couple of years. So my background's inherently all retail, and when we sold the dealership that I was at, I ended up going to work as the head of training for an F&I company. Did that for a few years, and started connected with some guys that were starting a company in California in this thing that had never been really talked about. It wasn't even called digital retail at the time. It was, how do we automate this checkout experience online to actually power e-commerce? And I joined up with them. I moved my pregnant wife and two daughters to San Francisco, and joined this company above a garage. We had zero dealers and a really good deck with a really good idea and a product that was pretty much built. And I really, the last 4 years, I've been in the marketplace working with dealers and implementing systems and processes to support digital retail, or what we call digital retail now, leveraging our tool to make a really streamlined experience for consumers. So I'm now the guest instructor at NADA in digital retail. I get to show up there for every class. I just finished up the class this week online today, and get to share my experience of what we've learned in the marketplace working with dealers, like with you and me together working inside of stores, what we've seen that hasn't worked, and really hoping to get that message out to as many dealers are listening, because I truly believe that a rising tide lifts all ships, and the better that we can all get at this, the better we can serve our customers, the better our industry is.
Yeah, and I guess probably an initial question would be, speaking about setting up a successful digital retailing operation, because that's really not just the technology. And let's just say it goes without saying that you guys have a world-class technology underpinning. So we'll get that out in the open. If you look at the top 2 or 3 in the market, you guys are there. It just all depends on the eyes of the beholder, right?
Yeah.
So, and you and I both agree, we're not here to pitch AutoFi per se, although I love AutoFi and we've got tons of dealers using it very successfully. When you think back to successful implementation, going back to who bought the product. So oftentimes, and I was sharing this with a young group of startup executives at a company yesterday, and I said, they have to have the money, they have to have the authority, and they have to have the desire. So when I was trained classically, it was your customer has to be mad, money, authority, and desire. So Joe, when you all are trying to find the right partnership with a dealership, is there that type of thought process that goes into who signs the agreement?
Yeah, so when you look at implementations, I think that early on, one of probably the mistakes that a lot of people in digital retail made was and I think I'm actually going to rewind even a little bit further. I think that there's this overarching misunderstanding of what digital retail is. I think everybody thinks of it as this customer that shows up to my website, picks out a car in a vacuum, clicks on a button, buys that car, and never wants to talk to anybody. And that happens. I mean, that customer exists. They're just not all customers, right? And I think that when I think about digital retail, it's really about empowering the people at the dealership to be more effective and more efficient. And it's like my good buddy Mike Lukey, who's the instructor at NADA, says, it's about making your salespeople Iron Man, right? It's about giving them this technology that makes them better at what they do. And I think a lot of times, very early on with digital retail, it kind of got lumped into the internet department as this like new lead. And I think we were so addicted to leads that it really stagnated the total capacity of what it could do. And so when I look at the areas where we really succeeded with an implementation, the dealers that, I mean, just took off. I'll give you good examples. Matt Blatt Kia in Egg Harbor, New Jersey. Matt Greenblatt, I met him at NADA Dealer Academy. He got all fired up, signed up. They'd been on another tool. They were on our tool for a few months. But what Matt did was he was the owner. He's the dealer principal. It's his name on the building, right? And he really liked that our consumers today are different than our consumers were 5-10 years ago, and we've got to be different to better serve those consumers. So he got very granular in everything from the marketing and the way that they were messaging and educating the consumer as to who they were and why a consumer should do business with them, to the granularity of what their follow-up systems and processes were, and moving away from kind of that dehumanized, how many people did you call, lead management system, into a much more focused like consumer human being connection system, and really brought all of those pieces together. That wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been the person that was driving the dealership. So I think sometimes what happens is the person that's driving the dealership gets excited, writes a check because they hear the message and they buy into it and they believe it. Then they end up turning it over to a person to implement who doesn't really have the authority, doesn't really have the buy-in or the vision to execute it. And what happens is then it kind of gets like lost in the shuffle of just day-to-day business. And what made Matt Blatt really successful was that Matt Greenblatt was bought in conceptually to the idea and granularly focused on the education and made believers out of everybody on the leadership team, where they started seeing the success of it, and then they started engaging. And that's when like the magic of like the owner really getting involved starts the wave. Right. And then when the like leadership team buys into it and they go, wow, this is working, the wave starts to crest, and then they start paddling really hard. And then it's like everything starts moving forward. And we see these, you can look purely at a data set from our side and understand what the dealership's doing well, right? When I look at Matt Blatt's data set, their applications went up by like 800%. The average credit score of people going through those applications went up by over 100 points. Well, that's because their educational message was no longer get pre-approved. Yeah. It was, look how easy this is. Click this button. You can do it all and save 2 hours, right? They're engaged. Their consumer click rate on sending out links to customers got over 90%, literally 9 out of 10 customers. Well, it's because their messaging was right. Because they would call and say, did you get the deal I sent you? Let me take some time to walk you through what that is. So like, for me, it's about this kind of wholesale shift in the way that we think about a consumer wanting to buy a car, and then executing across those kind of 3 pillars, right? The what I would call the like customer self-assisted, like when they come to our website, it should be super easy, right? It should be incredible. Like I should know exactly where to go to find what I want and to do what I want. And like when we get really good at that, that's one part. Then we get really good at like what I would consider to be the outreach. Like a lead comes in from anywhere, and now our outreach says, look how easy it is to do business with us. I'm going to give you everything that you want without you even asking for it.
Yeah.
And we see callbacks go up. We see email responses and text responses go up. And then there's the sales assisted model, which is like, David, you call in and you're asking about a vehicle that we have in inventory. And now I'm seamlessly getting you a car deal because I know that's part of your decision making, where you can look through it and like play around with it to help guide that decision. And you see these crazy things, right? You see car deals being worked that are almost in reverse, right? Where you go, okay, I can afford it. It makes sense. Well, now can I see it? Yeah, we'll bring it to your house and you can do a test drive. Like you see that customers are now able to control the process. And when they feel like they're in control of the process, their aptitude or their potential to buy starts to shoot up. And for me, I think the key is really owner buy-in and belief and commitment, and then the owner's ability or the general manager's ability to garner that in the team to go execute. And I think if there's not like clearly defined vision combined with a very definable action plan, I think it's going to stay. I have this slide that I drew in the middle of the night using my daughter's markers on a sheet of paper that was like, has a coloring book on the other side. And I was like, this is the problem. we put a green button on a website, and there's an arrow going to that green button that says customers and has money on it. And there's an arrow going from the green button that has money on it that says dealers. And the problem is that's what a lot of people think, but that's not a business plan. That's not what Amazon does. It's not what Uber does. It's not what Netflix does. It's not real. And I think that we like slap a button on our website and we check a box and go, okay, I'm doing digital retail. You think about what Amazon does. It's customer acquisition. It's their marketing. It's the smiley face in the box going down the thing. It's you leaving something in your cart and popping up and going, hey, David, do you still want this, right? Like it's all of these things to get you engaged. And then that button is the promise of a great customer experience. It's the start of a great customer. I click it, I go through it. It's awesome. And the backside of that is all the logistics, like customer service and delivery and all those things. And I think for a dealer, understanding that digital retail is not a green button on your website that magically sells cars, right? It's the promise of that customer experience. It's the start of that customer experience. And then it's the getting the customer to that experience and then delivering against that promise. And when dealers do that really well, the results shoot through the roof.
Well, Joe, that sounds hard. Why don't you just turn the technology on and let it sell me some cars? So you and I would laugh at that, but if you think about all the dealers that signed up during the pandemic, if you categorize them in a percentage, what percentage that were driven by their OEM perhaps, or driven by market forces or an article they read, what percentage of dealers signed up with that thinking? And you almost feel a little bit guilty if you're the receiving end of that. You know, here comes another contract from a dealer who all they literally did was sign a form and we had no interaction, but hey, you know, we're in the selling business, so let's write it up, but maybe we put it over here in this, you know, this category because they likely will turn or churn or whatever. What percentage of dealers, when you look at the pandemic, free flow sign up will actually stay on versus those who made a cerebral decision, compared you all with others in the marketplace, or even compared you all with just keeping business the way it is?
Yeah, so I don't have a percentage in my head that just pops out. What I can say is that I think that this is something that dealers have been thinking about for a while, right? It's that we've been talking about this for 3+ years. I mean, it's almost 4 years for me now, of the change in behavior of consumers. And I think what COVID did was pour accelerant on that.
Yes.
Right? It accelerates. Like I said, we were blasted light years into the future. And I think that when you look at the dealers that have signed up, I've been really, really impressed with the number of dealers that got really creative and that signed up and were very vocal in how they wanted their implementation to go because they were ready. Yes. And they'd been ready for a while. This was just what kind of bumped them into action. So we see a lot of dealers that were there. You know, luckily for us, not luckily, I mean, it's based on a lot of hard work and a lot of like really well thought out planning. You know, we had just come off that fundraising round and we had a really robust team put in place because we were like ready for growth. So from our dealer success management side, which is the team that's out in the field, you know, their role shifted. They became webinar experts and they were doing training. I mean, we had people working weekends because it was so important to help these dealers understand what all this meant. And we've seen, you know, our churn rate has historically been incredibly low for a software company. And I think a lot of that is driven by the support infrastructure that we've created to help dealers do it dealers' way. I mean, we have a 130-page guidebook to implementing digital retail. I don't expect a dealer to read that, but I expect our team to leverage it to help a dealer understand what are the like foundational pieces to get in place. So we think in phases. What is laying the groundwork, right? I don't show up day one to a BDC, flip over a table, and now we're doing everything different, right? It's about foundationally, how do I get my marketing and messaging right? And how do I respond to one of these leads where I don't sound like it doesn't connect, right? And then once we get that, we start building, right? And then we move to the next phase and the next phase. And so for us, it's about helping dealers through that process in a way to execute against their vision, right? Maybe your dealership only wants to focus on that incoming traffic. They're going to use it as a marketing piece and they're going to leverage that enhanced lead to give them quality information from a behavioral standpoint of where that customer is. And they don't want to go much past that. Well, we can help you be the best at that, right? Maybe I want to give a Carvana or Vroom-like experience to my consumers, and I want to really make my brand identity no longer, we're the biggest, most award-winning family-owned dealer, and now my brand identity is, you can buy this in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like if it's like Reichard always says, speed, convenience, value, right? Or speed, convenience, value. Maybe that becomes my new brand identity. And David, we've been doing digital retail and auto for as long as I've been in auto. We just didn't realize it. Because when I was an F&I manager, how many deals did I put together in a packet after talking to a consumer on the phone and getting them to send me a picture of their driver's license and insurance, to mail documents to an out-of-state customer so we could put it on a transport truck and deliver it to them? We've been doing Carvana for a long time. We don't advertise it, right? We don't tell people that we do it. It's like dealers always, and it's funny things to me, how many dealers like here's a challenge. Dealers don't want to put advertise a return policy. Like, oh, I can't do that. Okay, if you got a really hot customer that has a really bad experience with the car and they want to bring it back to you, what are you going to do? Well, we'll trade them out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, well then why aren't you leveraging that for marketing? Sure. Right? You'll already do it. Why aren't you telling people that you'll do it so that they trust your business more and want to do business with you? And so for me, it's about how we can help dealers by doing that. So David, to answer your question, I don't have a percentage of what I think are dealers that are going to bail out. I actually think it's going to be smaller than everybody is estimating, because I don't think we go back to business as usual or business that's just go back to normal. I think we're going to a new normal. And I think that the dealers that are leveraging it in marketplaces like Matt Black, like Rick Reichart, or like our buddy Brian Huth at Sampac Dallas, who had a 43% increase in new car sales, as he continues to go from number 9 in his region to number 3 in his region, people pay attention to that and people want their market share. And so I think that what's going to happen is that rising tide is going to lift all those ships. And for me, I see dealers focusing more of their efforts and getting good at it. And I'm sure there is going to be some dealers that are going to say, okay, I don't have to mess with it. Let's go back to selling cars the way we always have. And I think it's like Brian said last 2 weeks ago when I was there, if you're not doing this, you're getting left behind. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that.
And I think what I'd like to do is to keep this conversation going, Joe. And as you and I both collaborate, I just think it's in our nature to share things that work. If you're comfortable with it, we'll do these on shorter segments. And this is about 20 minutes long. And we'll come back, and here in a few weeks, maybe we can jump on for another update and talk about some other things. And I think one thing I want to pat you on the back with is you're an evangelist. You believe it from the heart, and people listen to you, because when you're that convicted and you really don't care which tool they use, although let's just put in a little plug for good old AutoFi, the spectacular tool, and certainly one that everybody should put on their list to consider. But you want the rising tide, as you exclaimed earlier, to bring everyone up, because if we can get this out to where everybody is successful doing it, then we as an industry just tend to improve. And thinking back to when you and I were on the floor selling cars, wouldn't it be great if we sat here and said, I got 7 people coming in today. Looks like I'll need to spend 20 minutes with this guy, maybe 30 with this guy. Oh, this one's just an express. I'll have him in out in 15 minutes. That's a wonderful world. And I can retain employees in that kind of environment, because, success will go up, income will go up, consumer loyalty will go up, and certainly dealership revenue will go up.
So I got to tell you a quick story. I was on the phone last week with Catherine Alexander, who's the GM of Access Ford. It's a Lithia store. So post-COVID, COVID, they shut down. They're in Corpus Christi. They laid off a bunch of people. Their salespeople are now, they're running this month 17 cars per person average. So that idea of making a salesperson so much more efficient and more effective gets me excited. I mean, that's what this is really about.
You bet. Well, Joe, you got a big heart, a great mind, and I'm a believer in you. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us. Get back to your family, and I'm sure looking forward to the AutoFi Roadshow and hearing more from the road about that.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. It's going to be so much fun. David, thank you so much for having me on. It was always a pleasure.
Bye-bye now.
Later, brother.